I am proud and honored to introduce our speaker today, Dick Striner. He is a world-recognized historian, scholar, teacher, and civic activist. He served as a professor of history for 30 years at Washington College, which is in Westminster, Maryland. I'm sorry? Chestertown, Maryland, which is what, just over the Bay Bridge and a little north? Yes. So God's country, right? He is the author of over a dozen books. He is also the author of numerous magazine and journal articles, as well as public affair commentaries and op-eds. So our connection is that Dick was a senior writer for the Dwight D. Eisenhower Commission. We have quite a connection with the commission. Our own Air Force General Carl Waddell was the executive director of that, and he roped Dick into being a writer for the commission, right? And I was counsel to the commission. You will see his most recent book, right? Ike in Love and War, about which he will talk, and I'm sure other things as well. Other books, Summons to Glory, The Audacious Life of Abraham Lincoln. Previous presidential books include Woodrow Wilson and World War I, A Burden Too Great to Bear, Lincoln and Race, Lincoln's Way, How 6 Great Presidents Created American Power, and Father Abraham, Lincoln's Relentless Struggle to End Slavery. But in any event, without further ado, I'd like to bring to the podium our esteemed guest today and author, Striner.
Before I begin, your president has requested me to share with you some personal information I shared with her. My wife and I have an adopted daughter who came to us as a foster child. So your president's mission is very close to my heart. I know that you have a strict 15-minute time limit for book talks. I aim to do my best to stay within that, but I've also been told you have a Q&A session. So I will try to be brisk, but if you wish to follow up and ask questions about anything I say, I would be delighted. I was persuaded to do this book on Eisenhower after doing all the other presidential books by Brigadier General Carl Waddell, the executive director of the Dwight D. Eisenhower Memorial Commission. I learned so much about Ike working for General Waddell, and he convinced me around 2019 it was high time for me to write a 1-volume biography of Ike. So I plunged into it. I knew to some extent what I was going to talk about. I was going to, of course, try to tell the story of the man's life, but I was also going to try to summarize some of the great achievements that Ike as a statesman bequeathed to us. Most remarkable president, underappreciated for reasons that are in some respects quite tragic. He deliberately downplayed his own achievements. Some of them were, in the field of national security, top secret. But beyond that, he went out of his way to underplay some of the magnificent things that he did. Some of them were quite well known, the launching of the interstate highway system, for example, but done with minimal fanfare. Some of them were kept quiet for political reasons. After the Brown versus Board of Education decision on school integration, Eisenhower quietly packed the courts with pro-integration judges, things like that. Now, a lot of these achievements have been set forth in the research, the published research of other historians, and I aim to present as much of these findings to a general audience as I could. Beyond that, I had no idea, what would captivate me as I got into this book project, and I was surprised to discover before very long when I got into it that it was Eisenhower's emotional development that interested me the most. And before I was done, I reached some conclusions that seemed to present a new slant on Eisenhower's emotional life. Some of my findings have been somewhat controversial. I'll tell you right now, I've come to conclusions in some cases about matters that I cannot definitively prove. If you find my conclusions convincing, so be it. If not, Go in peace. I have come to the conclusions that I have because these conclusions make sense to me. I invite you to read the book and see for yourselves, but also, as I say, follow up in Q&A. Now, one of the first themes that struck me as important when I studied Ike's childhood was his relationship with his parents and the locale of Kansas. And before long, it dawned upon me that his childhood experiences in some ways created an emotional imperative that I'm not going to say Briston, but had him prepared, I think unconsciously. I don't think, this life mission was clear to him in a conscious way when he was young. But here you have a career military man who gave the United States 8 years of uninterrupted peace. Another one of his achievements. I don't think that was any accident. Now, Eisenhower's parents, very, very improbable as husband and wife. Eisenhower's father, David Eisenhower, was an angry man, brooding, taciturn, punitive. Eisenhower's wife, Eisenhower's mother, David's wife, Eisenhower, completely the reverse. Happy, witty, clever, upbeat. Somehow they got along. What they had in common was they were devoutly religious. The Eisenhowers were part of a German Protestant pacifist sect, the River Brethren, like the Amish and Mennonites, Pennsylvania Dutch, quote unquote, committed pacifists. Now, during Ike's childhood, this is not all that surprising as a conclusion on family and childhood psychology. Eisenhower found his taciturn, brooding father a very hard man to love. And so he went about the town of Abilene looking for what psychologists would call father substitutes, mentors, rugged guys, He didn't want to be a mama's boy. He worshiped his mother, but you know the way it is. And before long, it dawned upon me. Ike was born in 1890. Only about a decade before that, Abilene had been the epicenter of the Wild West. It was a bloody, dangerous town. Ike learned how to shoot from a man who claimed to have been a deputy to Wild Bill Hickok, see? And so here you have a theme that seemed to me very relevant to the mid-20th century role of Ike as a fighting man who brought the world peace. The Wild West, you see, this was a way he could reconcile the fact that he was in target practice sessions, learning to be a skilled, marksman, a crack shot from guys who were good with guns, breaking the heart of his pacifist mother. How could he, achieve emotional peace? Well, it seemed to me it was simple. You learn the fighting arts, but then you use them. Another theme possessed my mind, the theme of Eisenhower's love life, which in my opinion was quite tragic. Yes, I am going to get into the matter of the Kay Summersby controversy. You know, many of you who I'm talking about. The beautiful former fashion model Anglo-Irish chauffeur whom Ike had in Britain and North Africa and France during World War II. The question being, did they or did they not have an affair? Well, any Eisenhower biographer has got to deal with this somehow. I didn't know what conclusions I was going to come to, but I knew that I would have to reckon with it somehow. Preparing to do this biography, I read other biographies of Eisenhower. I figured I would learn a lot beyond what I'd learned working for Carl Riddell. I also didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I wanted to become familiar with the biographical literature on Ike. Well, there have been some excellent biographies of Eisenhower done in the past quarter century or so, and only one of them mentioned Ike's first love. I'd known nothing about this. None of the other biographers covered it. Biographer, a military man named Carlo d'Este, who wrote a biography that covered only Ike's career through World War II, and then it stopped. Heavy emphasis on his military career, but for some reason, d'Este included this. No other biographer did. When Eisenhower was at West Point, he was thinking a lot about a girl in high school in Abilene, a girl named Gladys Harding, upon whom he had had an ardent crush. And in 1915, when he returned to Abilene, she was waiting for him. And they had this passionate romance in the summer of 1915. He proposed to her. She told him that she loved him, but she didn't answer his marriage proposal right away. Why? Well, she was a very serious musician, a concert pianist. She was about to leave on a concert tour of the United States, and she wasn't sure whether life as an army wife, would have been right for her, and she didn't want to make a mistake, so she needed some months to sort out her feelings. So off she goes on the concert tour. Ike goes off to San Antonio, Texas, to Fort Sam Houston, his first military posting. The love letters between Gladys Harding and Eisenhower survived. She kept them, and she gave them to her son with the admonition that they must never be released as long as Dwight Eisenhower, his wife Mamie, or she, Gladys Harding, were alive. Well, they fell into the hands of Carlo d'Este, and he told the story. I didn't hear about it anywhere else. Well, she didn't answer his proposal. All through the winter of 15-16, he's pining away, and while he's in San Antonio, he meets this vivacious, charming young woman, Mamie Dowd, and on Valentine's Day, 1916, he proposes, not knowing that Gladys Harding had made the decision to give it all up for him. And when she heard that he was engaged to someone else, she was so devastated that she said yes to a marriage proposal she'd previously turned down. The marriage was absolutely loveless. Talk about heartbreak. And he never knew. See, he never knew. Now, his marriage to Mamie Dowd, a very interesting and complicated subject. The marriage became troubled for lots of complicated reasons. One of the earliest reasons was quite tragic. In 1920, their first child, a cute little boy, died suddenly at age 3. Eisenhower never got over that. He said so in a short book of memoirs he wrote about 2 years before he died. Well, sometimes shared grief brings a couple closer together, but that's not what happened. According to granddaughter Susan Eisenhower, to Ike and Mamie, they drifted apart into private worlds of grieving. Their marriage became strained. Some of the emotional reasons for that must remain forever mysterious, but according to family members, that's the way it turned out. And then there was anger. He was sent to the Panama Canal Zone. She came along. She had an absolutely miserable time. He had the time of his life. I didn't get into it, but, there was resentment. In the 30s, he went to the Philippines. She refused to come with him. He didn't want another horrific experience in the pestilential tropics, and he was bitter and resentful about that, you see. And during World War II, he meets this winsome lass, that's right, Kay Summersby. Well, knowing what I did about Gladys Harding and the passion for her, which love letters reflect, knowing what had happened to the Eisenhower marriage, is it any wonder? You see, here was a chance in middle age for him to recapture what he had lost. Yes, I think, too often it's treated as a mere sex scandal. Well, if people want to treat it that way, let them. I see it as a tale of tragic love. After Eisenhower died, and a year after Harry Truman died, a writer named Merle Miller published a book called a, quote, oral history, unquote, of Harry Truman. Well, this book was very, very controversial when it came out in the early 70s because Truman allegedly revealed, Merle Miller revealed that Truman allegedly revealed that in 1945, Eisenhower was planning to divorce Mamie and marry Kay Summers. And Eisenhower wrote a letter to George Marshall, saying, I want to be relieved immediately. I'm coming back to the States to divorce and then spend the rest of my life. And according to Truman, according to Miller, George Marshall fired back a letter. Truman said, the light which I never did see. Marshall allegedly said to Eisenhower, why you fill in the blanks yourselves, good, salty, colorful military language. Don't you dare do that. If you dare to do such a thing, I'll bust you out of the army. So help me, I'll make the rest of your life a living hell. And Truman allegedly said, one of the last things I did, President, I got those letters out of Eisenhower's file and destroyed them. And the historical profession just descended upon Merle Miller, you know, like the ancient Greek furies. That's impossible. It cannot be believed. You made it up. If Truman said it, he was senile. Yeah. Well, when the book, in speaking, was published, Kay Summersby found herself stunned. She was still alive. And she had never known for certain whether Eisenhower had thought about, you know, giving it all up to spend the rest of his life with her. So she decided to write a tell-all memoir, Past Forgetting My Love Affair with Dwight D. Eisenhower. She wrote it as she was dying of cancer. She said, absolutely, you know, he was the love of my life. It was vice versa. He dumped me all of a sudden in 1945, but I got over it. And notwithstanding the heartbreak, the pain, I look back upon that with rapture, really, because it was everything I wanted in a man, and I've never met anyone like him since. And at least I had that experience. That's some comfort to me at the end. And the historical profession descended upon her like the ancient Greek furies. You know, it's sensationalism. She's doing it for the money, and so on and so forth. Well, I found a great deal of corroborating evidence, not least of all an interview in 1996 at the Harry Truman Library, Presidential Library, with a man named John Steelman, who was Truman's chief of staff in 1946. And the first thing the interviewer asked him was, what about the, you know, Ike Marshall divorce letters controversy? And Steelman said, oh, yes, I was there. As soon as George Marshall received the letter, he called me and he said, I want to see the president in the Oval Office immediately, and I want you to sit in as a witness because I'm going to roast Eisenhower out of his socks, and he's a war hero, and Truman loves him, and I don't care. You come, you set it up tomorrow, be there. And Steelman said, absolutely. You know, Marshall told Truman, you know, I'm going to send him back. So anyway, I think it happened. The question is, if the feeling was mutual, if Kay Summersby was the love of Ike's life, why did he suddenly dump her in 1945? I have a theory. The presidential kingmakers were already, you know, at his doorstep. In 1945, Truman told Eisenhower, I will, if you will run as a Democrat, you're running mate, or not, you know, you need to be president. The world needs you. Well, it was impossible in those days to get elected to the presidency if you were divorced. I mean, as late as 1964, Nelson Rockefeller's quest for the Republican nomination was killed because he was divorced. It was Ronald Reagan who finally broke that coup in 1980. So Eisenhower had to make a decision. So the rest of his life with Kay, or give her up and his destiny. See, he was the best American war hero. He'd proved his skills as a fighting man, but had he proved he could keep the peace? No, he hadn't. And was he prepared to just forget about all that? No, he couldn't do it. He had to fulfill his destiny at the cost of what I regard as tragic sacrifice. You know, so many of the mysteries surrounding Eisenhower become clear if one does presume, for the sake of the argument, that he was telling the truth. I'll give you one example and then I'll stop. In the years between Eisenhower's World War II military career and his presidential career, his behavior was, to my way of thinking, often very strange indeed. In 1948, he becomes president of Columbia University. Many of you, I'm sure, know this. He took up his duties in June of 1948, and then in October, the formal academic investiture, you know, all the pomp and the grandeur. And he got off to a great start at Columbia. The students loved him. The faculty loved him. 1 month after he was invested with the office of president of Columbia University, he sends a letter to James Forrestal, Secretary of Defense, newly established cabinet cabinet level department saying, "You seem to be having budget problems down there. The services are squabbling over budget. Maybe I can help." And Forrestal said, "Well, I just told President Truman of your interest. He wonders if you'll chair the Joint Chiefs of Staff." And Eisenhower said, "Yes, I'll do that. I want to help." And he told the Columbia trustees, "I can do both jobs. It's no problem." So he's back and forth between New York City and Washington, living out of a suitcase and hating it. He hated it. His diary shows that. Why on earth? How can you explain such behavior? Well, read Case Summersby's book. She was living in New York, see. She was a consultant. She was a former fashion model. She became a consultant for fashion design in stage plays for the new industry of television. She was having a good time, making good money, and then she picks up the New York Times and reads that Dwight Eisenhower is going to be coming to New York to be president of Columbia University. She said, "I thought I was over it. I wasn't. My hands were shaking. I was lovesick like a schoolgirl. I had to see him. So I would take the subway," she said, "up to Columbia University, wander around the campus. See, I found out where his house was and his office. And then he comes across her on campus and he just freezes up. Is it any wonder he wants to get out of New York all of a sudden as often as he can? It makes sense to me. Can I prove it? No." But it's mighty interesting. I am out of time for sure. So thank you for your patience. I would love to answer questions if you have them.
Hold on. We definitely have questions. I could listen to him all day. I'm not even kidding. You are a storyteller, for real.
You are a hell of a storyteller, sir. Thank you very much. Susan Eisenhower is a good friend of mine. So that he was born in Denison, Texas, which was close to where I was. Yeah. So I got to know her through that. I do have a question for you, though. You said that Eisenhower deliberately tried to get people on the Supreme Court to support integration. He is also quoted as saying his greatest regret was having chosen Earl Warren to be the Supreme Court on the Supreme Court. And that seemed like a contradiction. Would you explain, please?
Yes, I will. First of all, with regard to Susan Eisenhower, with respect to her and the Eisenhower family, she in particular takes great exception to the allegations about Ike and Kay Summersby, and I did not write my book to upset her or anyone or to achieve a sensationalistic effect. I didn't know going into it how I was going to handle the Summersby material, but as I say, things just unfolded for me the way they did. Could I be wrong? Certainly. This is the way things seem to me. Now, as regards Eisenhower and his achievement in civil rights, Eisenhower knew that Earl Warren was in favor of school integration. As soon as Eisenhower had been elected, Herbert Brownell, who had been campaign manager to Thomas Dewey, the Republican nominee in 1948, and who was soon to become Eisenhower's attorney general, was talking with Ike about cabinet appointments, and Eisenhower had at first been inclined. Earl Warren had also been Thomas Dewey's running mate in 1948. Eisenhower was inclined to ask Earl Warren to be attorney general. Well, Brownell wanted to be attorney general, and he soon got that appointment. But he suggested Earl Warren for the first Supreme Court vacancy. And Eisenhower said, fine. And Brownell said, now he is very pro-integration. And Eisenhower said, well, that's fine, too. African-American leaders had courted Ike in the 1952 campaign, and Ike was glad to have African-American support, and he promised that as soon as he took office, he would do everything he could as president to use federal authority where federal authority applied to advance the cause of civil rights. And here in the nation's capital, there was no home rule, in 1952. federal commissioners ran the city. The president had great authority in matters pertaining to the nation's capital. And Eisenhower began systematically forcing, the desegregation of facilities in Washington, D.C. He forced the desegregation of the military. Truman had ordered it, but the non-compliance, among military was scandalous, and Eisenhower made them comply. Even in the Navy, which was the worst, of the services for resisting.
Yes.
Right. Eisenhower forced them. And in 54, the year of, after Eisenhower, after the death of Fred, the incumbent Chief Justice, Eisenhower sent Earl Warren's nomination. The nomination was controversial. I insisted on it. And in 54, the case that was already pending before the court, that was in the Brown v. Board of Education decision, was on Brownell's desk. And I said to Brownell, what do you recommend? And Brownell said, well, I think the Plessy v. Ferguson decision of 1896 was wrongly decided. I think school desegregation should be held to be unconstitutional, a violation of the 14th Amendment. I so recommend, and Eisenhower said, fine. And then the court had down a decision, and Eisenhower systematically follows up by packing, the federal judiciary with pro-integration judges. Whether Eisenhower actually said, as he is alleged to have said, that the appointment of the nomination of Earl Warren was the biggest damn mistake he ever made, I have my doubts about that. It's possible he might have said it for a reason that I will now seek to explain. Eisenhower sought to advance the cause of civil rights while at one and the same time keeping the nation calm. This was very, very important to him because in 1952, the political culture of the United States was on the brink of, hysteria. The country was just polluted with rage, vindictiveness, sound familiar? And Eisenhower saw it as a part of his mission as a peacekeeper, bring about an age of good feelings. So handling the civil rights issue was very tricky for him. He, above all, in this particular area, wanted to use quiet, hidden, techniques. But the issue could be kept hidden. So activists were on the march, insisting after Brown that school desegregation be accomplished, and by 1957, the crisis in Little Rock, Arkansas, was in Eisenhower's hands. He had been hoping that the issue could be finessed slowly, gradually, while maintaining an age of good feelings, but that was not to be. And memoirs of Eisenhower's at that time, in their own memoirs, recorded that he was frustrated, fit to be tied, sometimes full of, petulant resentment over the condition in which he found himself placed. Now, coping with feelings like those, is it possible that he might have blurted out that statement that appointing Earl Warren was the biggest damn fool mistake he ever made? It's possible. Frankly, I doubt it, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. Nonetheless, when push came to shove, Eisenhower responded to the defiance of Governor Orville Faubus of Arkansas by sending the 101st Airborne Division, the very same unit that had, gone to France in D-Day. He occupied Little Rock, Arkansas. And he said, one thing I've learned as a military man is you're going to use force, you will force. Right. Please.
Give him a round of applause. I would like to present to you each week, our club presents our speaker with a tree planting, and we are going to plant a tree in your honor right here in the tidal basin. And you can look on here. I signed it, see there. And you can look on here and you will be able to locate your tree.
Oh, that's
and
thrilling.
Also, here's a pin. That's by GPS. I think it's
Thank
GPS.
you.
That's
marvelous.
yeah, so that's, and thank you also for taking in a foster child and adopting. That means a lot.